Welcome to Conversations About Construction. I'm Dave Trafford. This podcast is produced and presented by the Residential and Civil Construction Alliance of Ontario. Members of the Alliance build your homes. They build your transportation networks and the systems that deliver safe, clean drinking water to your kitchen sink. This series will focus on industry innovations and solutions that support sustainable economic development and Ontario's world-class standard of living. In this episode, Ontario faces job losses in the tens of thousands in the next 10 years if the federal government fails to move ahead with much-needed infrastructure projects. Peter Smith is the chair of the Residential and Civil Construction Alliance of Ontario. He joins us to talk about the urgent need to get shovels in the ground. I've said this before. You and I, in fact, I think Peter talked about this in other episodes of this podcast. And we had a great chat on the radio about it. The idea that government, there's low-hanging fruit here just to get our economy back up and running. And it is infrastructure. And it doesn't have to be big, major, technical, long-term, major transit projects that are going to be 50 years in the making. There are projects right now that we should be paying attention to that will help get people back to work and get your industry back rolling where it should be.
Well, thank you. And that's correct. Every municipality has a list of the things that they want to get done, and they prepare them a year or two in advance. And at the beginning of this year, it looked like a fantastic year for the construction industry. That there was all of this regular maintenance or state of good repair work that we were looking at seeing come out for tender. So it was going to be a great year. Unfortunately, COVID hit. And when that happened, municipalities had a funding problem. They had all kinds of operational issues. They had to keep their buses running. They had to have the garbage picked up. But unfortunately, while they had the same cost to run the buses, they didn't have the ridership. So the bus cost a lot of money to run from point A to point B, but instead of carrying 70 or 80 people, they were only carrying 2. So that led to over $1 billion shortfall in the city of Toronto, and other large municipalities in southern Ontario have similar problems. There were special COVID responses, so municipalities were short with their revenue, but they had a big problem with their cost base. So one of the easiest ways to do that is to say, I guess I'm not going to fix up the road. I'm not going to fix up the sewer. I'm not going to do all of those things that I know I need to do in the midterm. I'm not going to do them today. Let's put that off. And unfortunately, Ontario has had a history. Every time there's a bit of an economic turndown, they say, well, let's put off all of those repairs that I know we need to do in the sewers and the water treatment plants, et cetera. Let's put them off for another day. And in the last 5 or 6 years, the governments have had a good time. The money's rolled in, and they said, let's catch up. Let's get that work done. Let's get our infrastructure back to where it needs to be. Let's be proud of what we have. Let's not have situations where we have boiled water alerts in the city, or we have pieces of the Gardiner Expressway falling down. Let's fix those. Great. Then COVID happened, and guess what? All of that is being put by the wayside. The City of Toronto is going to defer almost $400 million of worth that was slated for this year. And more concerning, they really don't know what they're going to do in 2021.
I guess the issue, though, is that the municipalities are in a place where they can't raise their own revenue. They got a limited amount of money. They can't run deficits. So this really falls in the lap of higher levels of government, doesn't it?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Dave, and that is the concern. The federal government and the provincial government have an ability to go out and borrow money, and they desperately need to help the municipalities through this situation. The Municipal Act in Ontario forbids municipalities from going out and raising money through debt, and because of that, they rely on the province and the feds. And we see the province willing to step up and try to help, but they really need their partners with the federal government to step up. Historically, there has been programs, the the Infrastructure Canada program, where municipalities will chip in a third, the province chips in a third, and the federal government chips in a third. And that way, infrastructure improvements are made across the country. Unfortunately, right now, the municipalities can't chip in their third, and that stalls the whole program.
Well, and this is all about jobs too, and I think in the short term, I know the Residential Civil Construction Alliance of Ontario, you guys hooked up with the Canadian Centre for Economic Analysis. I know they have been doing a lot of work with you lately on this, and they put some pretty stark numbers on this. We're talking about 60,000 odd jobs, $22 billion over the next 10 years that we could lose in this province if they don't act now.
That's exactly correct. And, the latest numbers, we're thinking that there could be 25,000 jobs lost between now and the spring. And that is basically in the GTAH. That's a lot of jobs. They're good paying jobs. And there's going to be a lot of families that are going to be facing a pretty stark winter if we don't do something about this now. And as you started off this program, we have the ability, you'll hear the term shovel ready. Well, the municipalities came into this year with a list of what they needed to get accomplished this year. They had the consulting engineers do the work. The drawings are ready. They're ready to come out to tender, but they just don't have the money. So if there was a magic bank account that was created, that work could be out in the sector in the next few weeks, and people could not lose their job or get back in the workforce.
So when we talk about those shovel-ready jobs, I mean, sometimes my experience with covering government and big infrastructure projects is they like to look at the one where you can kind of have the ribbon cutting and there's a news release that goes with it and all kinds of opportunities for photo ops, et cetera. But, tarring the roof of a building, which might be really necessary to preserve the asset, just doesn't get the jazz that you might otherwise get by starting a new transit service or a system. But those are the real jobs that can be taken care of right now. I remember talking to the mayor in Toronto about 6 months ago, and he said it was a great opportunity for the city to be able to do pothole filling and repair. And it doesn't sound like much, but you know what? It needed to be done. But it's those kinds of jobs we're talking about, right?
Oh, that's exactly correct. And there are literally dozens and dozens of those, whether it's fixing up the disjointed sidewalk or that there are potholes. There are areas of bridges that need to be repaired right now. There's water treatment plants that need to be upgraded. They're not very sexy, but they're things that need to be done. And the municipalities have prioritized them that should be done this year or next year, and they're not being done at all because we have this cash problem. Construction creates a lot of jobs for new Canadians, for young people. A skilled tradesperson can make $100,000 a year. It's a great opportunity for the area that the government wants to get back to work. And all we need is basically the opportunity. What's really stark is at the beginning of this year, I had meetings with both Infrastructure Ontario and Metrolinx, and they were admonishing the industry for not hiring enough young people, not hiring enough new Canadians to keep up with the demand that was going to be put on them in 2020. And we stepped up. We spent $250,000 advertising the trades to young Canadians. And as soon as we start that program, all of a sudden there's massive cutbacks. So rather than having too much work, we don't have enough work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So capacity at your end all of a sudden isn't the issue. And there was a worry at one point, whether or not, considering the number of jobs that were out there and the big projects, were there going to be enough workers in the system? Clearly, that's not necessarily the case now. The other side of this equation is, in terms of return on investment, this isn't just about governments literally throwing money into a hole in the ground. This is about investing in it, because otherwise, if they don't do this, the government ends up losing tax revenue, right?
That is exactly correct. Someone has a good job. He goes to work every day. He pays his taxes. And it's not just direct jobs. There's downstream jobs. So if, let's say, for example, there's a new bridge that's not being built, the people that were working in the ready mix concrete plant, they're not being employed. The people that were going to bring the sand and gravel, all of the equipment that was going to come to the job site, that's not going to happen. There's a big multiplier effect because you are investing locally, and the best news is at the end of the day, you have a hard asset to show people and say, yes, we spent $10 million on this project, but now we have a new bridge. We have a new a water treatment plant expansion. These are things that stay with you for the long term. And as you pointed out, there's only so long you can stretch things out before they become unrepairable.
Well, and then you lose the asset.
That is exactly correct. And, when you look at the amount of time that people spend stopped in traffic because the roads are too congested, everything that we consume more or less comes into the city by a truck. And if that truck is stopped on the highway, the Gardner Expressway, trying to come up Spadina to get to the local store, it's just time, and we're burning fuel. It's bad for the environment, and it's a complete waste of everyone's time when we could invest the money that we've said that the logical thing to do is to fix these things, and we're not.
So what's the solution here? Because, I don't think anybody would argue with you that this is necessary, and there's a bottleneck for funding at the the senior levels of government. And what strikes me as a surprising part of this, Peter, is that the feds and the province historically over the last 15 years or so has actually been very good at investing in infrastructure, at seeing that as being a priority, that making sure that, our infrastructure is being maintained. There was a change in the perspective there, particularly over, I say, the last 15 years or so. And I get why this has happened vis-a-vis COVID, but why has the voice been lost on behalf of the industry to make the case for this infrastructure project?
Well, it's a really good question, and I think sometimes the people have been around for a while think, well, we've already made that case. People understand. The government knows that infrastructure is important. It's a great investment. There's a multiplier effect for the economy. The problem is that every time there's a major change in government, there are new bodies, and I don't think that everyone that's making decisions are as aware of this problem as they should be. There's other challenges that come out too, Dave, specifically around COVID, because I represent the Residential and Civil Construction Alliance, and we talked about infrastructure, but COVID is going to place a huge demand on spaces in shelters for the homeless, affordable housing. With the shelters that are set up for this winter, beds were very close. COVID happens, and we need more space. So there's a huge need for government to spend money to protect the most vulnerable people, be that in a nursing home where they need more space, the homeless spaces. And if there was an affordable housing problem in Toronto, it just got worse because people that are in very small condominiums are going to be looking at, I would like more space. And as we all know, it's very, very unaffordable in Toronto.
Well, all the more reason to be taking, and I say this often, nobody wants to cheer for COVID-19, but if we look at this rather as an opportunity for solution rather than problems, to say that there are places right now and there are opportunities even within some of those facilities where your industry, and it's a very broad range you guys cover in terms of the infrastructure sector. The idea that we can use this opportunity now to upgrade the facilities we've already got, and again, get more out of them, make them COVID safe. And let's face it, some of these standards are going to change building codes. They're going to change the way we have safety codes moving forward, whether it's long-term care or homeless facilities or just your condominium. So this is an opportunity to get in front of that curve. And I would think that you would hope that we would learn from the lessons of COVID, and this is one of them.
I think you're absolutely right. But as the wise person said, those that are don't learn from history are condemned to relive it. And unfortunately, Paul Martin said during the downturn in the early 90s that we need to invest in our infrastructure, and the Liberals did a great job in investing in infrastructure at that time. Stephen Harper brought out some infrastructure stimulus in the 2009, and we even looked at home renovation credits. It's time for our federal government to step up again and follow those leads and do a similar thing to make sure that our infrastructure is as good as a first world countries should be, and we invest in Canadians, get them back to work, and give us an infrastructure system that we can be proud of.
Does this threaten sort of an existential threat to the industry itself? Because as you describe it to me, if we keep waiting, it's going to be more and more difficult to attract somebody into this industry when jobs are on hold. I'm going to go and find something else to do. I'm going to put my brain into something else. I'm going to learn how to code. I'm going to, whatever it might be. Is there a closing window here? Because, you are talking about focusing on a younger demographic. You need the younger workers to come into this industry, and you've worked hard at attracting them. This really creates a stumbling block here. Does this threaten the industry?
Absolutely, it does. And you look at the young people that are today at the community colleges or at university studying technology, studying construction sciences. Most of them would be looking for some sort of a summer co-op. There were very few opportunities this year. Employers would like to do that, but they're stretched financially. And there's the concerns around how do we handle COVID, because it's a brand new situation. It's something that's very concerning about the long-term health. As we know, there's a very aging demographic in the skilled trades, and there's going to be at least 100,000 vacancies in the next 5 years, strictly due to the aging demographics. We need to replace them, and we've been advertising and through the Job Talks program, trying to reach out to younger people. But unfortunately, it's not going to be very appealing if they find out, yeah, that's great, I'm going to go apply for a job, and no one can hire because they're laying off the skilled trades they have. It's a great opportunity for the government to do the right thing. And, to be honest, our governments were attracting foreign workers a few years ago because they felt that we had no capacity in Canada. And now, just, a year or two later, we're putting a disincentive towards our own young people that could learn a great job, a skill that could last for their life, and there's no entry. So it's great to have a skill, but if you don't have an opportunity to work as an apprentice, it just the whole opportunity withers and dies.
Well, even if you had an opportunity to work as an apprentice, to your point where you're talking about 100,000 jobs just sort of by attrition leaving the industry, you're losing mentors.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. No, that is exactly correct. So time is of the essence. We want to be exposing or, as you said, mentoring these young people now. And if we lose a year or two before the government sort of steps up and starts putting their money right now into these infrastructure programs, we're going to miss a huge opportunity. Absolutely.
Yeah, and it again, I get it. People are drinking water out of a fire hose, and there are so many things that are going on. It's hard to nail it down, but it strikes me as unfortunate that something that would appear to be fairly turnkey, and I don't use that phrase loosely, to diminish the complexity of this, but it would be a simpler thing. There's low hanging fruit there. So here's hoping that somebody, the folks at Queen's Park and Parliament Hill hear your voice, Peter. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Dave.
Peter Smith is the new chair of the Residential and Civil Construction Alliance of Ontario. If you want more information, you should check out their website. And it contains this report from the Canadian Centre for Economic Analysis. And they take the deep dive on this. And they give you the numbers. They're unvarnished. They explain that, we could lose out on more than 60,000 jobs and $22 billion in provincial and federal government revenue over the next 10 years if we don't take action now on those two levels of government, making sure that infrastructure moves forward here in Ontario. And in fact, it's not just an Ontario problem. This is across the country. It's all about jobs. It's all about us getting through COVID. You've been listening to Conversations About Construction, and we'd encourage you to subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts and share it with your network. Conversations About Construction is produced for the Residential and Civil Construction Alliance of Ontario by iContact Productions. I'm Dave Trafford.